I got this complete engine fresh out of a Ferrari 360 totally for free, and it could be worth a lot, but it could also cost even more to rebuild. We got a clean drain pan here. It's not that clean anymore because I'm getting dirt in it, but just in case we were to see any metal chunks or anything like that that are obvious. Oh look, there we go.
Nice and milky.
Hey guys, I'm Sam Crack, and recently when I went to pick up a Ferrari transmission I bought off of eBay, the owner of this Ferrari and its parts offered me the engine totally free. His 360 just wasn't running right, and the shop quoted him over $30,000 to fix it. So Drew, the owner, did the most sensible thing and tore the stock engine out and dropped in a Turbo LS, which now makes his Ferrari 360 about 50 times more reliable and 3 times as fast as any ordinary one. Watch the turmoil I've faced trying to tame my prancing horse, it makes a whole lot of sense to do exactly what Drew did. Just like a living, breathing horse, my 360 seems to need tending to weekly. While it runs and drives, and it does so pretty well, it's not uncommon to experience any sort of issue while just trying to use it. That's why I stopped using it and bought a much cheaper, more reliable prancing horse that is just as fast and arguably as fun to drive, but we'll talk about that at another time. I've nearly gone broke 4 or 5 times while trying to fix my Ferrari, so I know we need to proceed with extreme fiscal caution here. No matter how good or bad this engine is, and spoiler alert, I think it's actually really good, it could be worth around 20 grand. But if we just jump to a complete rebuild, it would be easy to spend more in parts than the engine's even worth. It's what makes a Ferrari a really strange hard asset to invest in. Even though it could be a total nightmare, over time the value of these things just continue to trickle upward, which in theory makes it worthy enough to keep dumping money into, I guess. This theory can be applied to almost anything Ferrari. It doesn't matter if it's a salvage Ferrari, Ferrari parts, even a Lego Ferrari, all of these have proven to be good, hard investments. As we experience with the engine computers from my 360, as time goes on and parts continue to become more scarce, the values continue to rise, which in turn makes the cars themselves more valuable. And no matter what you might think, Ferrari has done an incredible job of creating more than just a car. They're truly a work of art. Which makes me a bit of an art investor. You see, besides my salvage 360, I also have a Banksy and a Basquiat in my portfolio. I know what you're thinking. How's the guy that literally buys the world's cheapest Ferrari own some of the world's most expensive pieces of artwork? And it's very simple. It's because I'm a member of Masterworks, the new school way to invest in exclusive, highly collectible blue chip art. Fine art has proven to be one of the best hard assets to invest in. In the Woods by New York icon KAWS sold for over $3.8 million in 2019. Just 3 years prior, it was purchased for $430,000, a nearly 9-time return. Contemporary art prices have outpaced the S&P 500 total return by 174% from 1995 to 2020. But this market was always reserved for the ultra-wealthy, until now. Masterworks has emerged as the only platform providing normal guys access to what used to be only for multimillionaires. You can invest in the very same art for just a fraction with Masterworks.io. Getting started is simple. With just a few clicks, you can browse their extensive art collection and create your very own art portfolio. Today's stock market can be as temperamental as a salvage supercar. Consider diversifying your portfolio with a little bit of art. Check out masterworks.art/samcrack or just click the link in the description. Now, I gotta give a huge thanks to Masterworks for allowing guys like you and me to participate in an exclusive art market and for also sponsoring this video. Yep, and that's a good thing we did that now, but that does not bode well for the insides there. While we're making a mess with fluids, I figure I might as well check the transmission fluid. And what we want to see here is just good gear oil, or whatever's left of some good gear oil, to make sure this is good, because I'm actually going to need this part soon. And there you go, that is good gear oil right there. They didn't even pull it out, so that's a really good sign that we have a nice transmission here. That's exactly what you want to see, is some good gear oil. A common issue with these cars is that the coolers, it's in the valley of the engine there, will bust. And that's actually the transmission cooler. And we'll mix the coolant along with that gear oil. That's my number one concern, sourcing used transmission. It's really hard to actually find a decent one of these used. So the price we paid for this, seeing that we got good clean gear oil and a lot of it, means they literally pulled this from the car and didn't touch it. So this is an awesome unit, even though it looks a bit dingy on the outside. It was an absolute steal for what we paid for it. This is gonna go really good in that other project that I need it for. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with the green car, thank God. But it's going to be a fun project. You'll see what I'm talking about soon. So these have the upgraded bearings. The timing belts are all intact, have tension on them. This one feels a little loose, to be honest. Look at this. So the way you set the tension on these timing belts when you're doing a timing job is by the tone that they make when you strum them, almost like a guitar. There's an app, and there's also a tool that can just tell a frequency. So again, you can hear a difference if you're really close. Come here, you listen to this. And now listen to this one.
To get our reading on these belts, the official way of doing this from Ferrari is you would use a harmonic reader, sound reader, and you need to take 2 readings on these belts. So one on this long expanse here, one on this short expanse. You would combine the 2 together and make sure it's within factory spec, which is between 190 and 220 hertz. So if I do the long one here, so I like to get a few readings on this and just make sure. So I had a 114, a 116, a 120, 114 again. Okay, so we're around about 114, 115 is at the average. Then we do the same on this one. $127, $120.
Either somebody set the tension off when they did the timing job on this, or the hydraulic tensioner failed, which is something else that I find interesting because I've talked to a bunch of people before I did my timing job, and nobody recommended I buy the hydraulic tensioners. A lot of shops roll without them and they just reuse the ones that were in the car. I did end up doing the hydraulic tensioners in my car, and I think they were by far the most expensive component of the entire timing job. I think each one of these at the time cost like $350 or $400. So you can see why people don't do them, but maybe should do them. We don't know quite yet. Also, when we pull these off the engine, we'll be able to clean them up, and they should have a manufacture date stamped on them. So it'll be interesting to see if, again, these are the original ones that came with the car. But otherwise, let's just keep tearing things down, and eventually the mystery will solve itself here. All right, so here is one of the 2 hydraulic tensioners. When you see the overall condition of it, it sure looks like a really old one that's probably the original, but like I said, there's a date code stamped on the back, and that'll tell us exactly what we're dealing with here, and they come off with just these 2 bolts, so real simple. All right, so can you see these numbers?
Yep.
This looks like it's a 1st of December 2000. I think the Europeans do it in reverse, but either way, that 00 indicates that this part was manufactured in 2000. Ferrari 360 was built between 99 and 2005, which means that this is definitely the original tensioner that came on this engine from the Ferrari factory. This has never been replaced, which is a shame because it could very well be the culprit. Well, not this side, the other one. They could be the culprit as to why that belt lost tension, and well, we'll see what happens when we take the heads off. Look at this one. Look at this one. The 1st of July 2000. Again, another one of these tensioners manufactured in 2000. These are the original tensioners. So the nuts holding on the cylinder head are in these little valleys here. I can get to the edge ones with my standard box wrench, and I get a little bit of movement, but the ones in the dead center here, this will not fit around. There's just not enough space side to side, and it won't seat on top of the nut. So what I did is I grabbed my offset wrench here, and that won't barely fit in at all because the angle. Turns out that Ferrari actually makes a specialty tool for this, and it is very expensive. Now, a company that has made an aftermarket version of this still wants $500 between 2 separate tools in order to reach these nuts. I've got a little bit of a better idea. I went online and found an auto parts store tool, so they're going to deliver it hopefully in just a few moments. It's really inexpensive, and well, let's see if it works out.
You ordered the $5 ring spanner.
I just ordered a 15 mil wrench, man. That's all.
This one's all the way from the UK. Could you use the discount code? I hand deliver it.
Amazing. We got Radarosa all the way from England, the Ferrari 360 expert. And he said, think simple on this, right?
Think simple, free engine. Why would you spend £300, $500 on a tool? What's that? 1%?
Yeah, something like
1%,
that.
isn't it? Let's try it.
So basically the idea behind this is a lot cheaper of a wrench. Still pretty long, so we're going to have a little bit of leverage.
So, this one was just slightly too big around here. Hopefully, if we compare those, you can see, look at that. Just by chance, this one might just work.
Let's see.
So, let's try in here. And, let's see, shall we?
Go ahead. Maybe we get a hammer instead of using your hand, right?
These are tough, man, these guns. The problem we've got is the height as well. This is nice and slim. And look at that.
Yeah, fits right in there.
It's
real
on
nice.
there.
And that's, again, one of the center ones. I was able to get to the outside ones, but the center ones, not at all.
Let's see if we can get this thing to move. Now.
Look at that. It's moving. It's going to take us a while, but...
Look at that.
Wow, look at that move. I can't believe you got that much movement. It's not going to be bad.
Look at that, look.
Oh, my gosh.
That's it.
That's incredible.
$5.
You know how long I've had this engine here? Since putting things on hold. I was looking for alternatives to the Ferrari tool, which, by the way, if this engine is savable, we're still going to need to get that tool or hopefully make that tool because you got to torque a cylinder head to spec.
Okay, so anyone's got a good idea how we can avoid spending $500 to be able to torque these bolts up, something like this, write them in the comments below.
And what will we get? We'll give them something.
Yeah, well, what do you want? Puma t-shirt?
Puma t-shirt.
Ratarossa Soundcrack signed Puma t-shirt.
There we go. I like that. We got that. We'll make it happen if you can give us a good idea on how to recreate this tool. This tool right here. This tool. Let's start with this one. We'll get the other one.
Ready?
Yep.
This one's jammed a little bit.
All right, your way. Right here. You can just do it.
Wow.
Woo! What are we gonna find? I'm really surprised at the condition of things here at first glance. So, quick note, we did take the camshafts out initially because I thought the head bolts lived underneath the camshafts in the heads here, and then we found out that they're held on with those studs and those nuts. So we put them all back together. So while they're in there, we did shift things around a little bit, and that might have caused, again, some of these valves to be sitting up here. But you're just seeing them sit up. I don't see any bends. I don't see any issues. And it's really strange because, again, remember we were told we had a zero compression on one side. And usually that is always indicative of valves that touch pistons and then they're bent upward, allowing the compression just to escape right up and out of them. Now, sometimes they just kiss the edge of the piston and again, will unseat from where they go and still cause that zero compression situation. But if you look closely at everything here, it doesn't look like anything has touched. I think that these are a head job away from being worth several $1,000s a piece. So with the heads off, it's kind of the same story as we saw with the scope camera. The cylinders that didn't take on a lot of moisture they look incredible, really. Look at all of these here. Now the one all the way at the end and this one obviously had quite a bit of moisture in it. This one I've got a rag in it just soaking things up. Nice and mucky. Be really interesting to see how this thing cleans up. This side, again, the same story. This piston was pushed all the way up, so the moisture that got in sat kind of towards the top, which is good. Now, this is the concerning one right here. You see all these little marks in here. This is what looks a lot like scoring, but can't actually feel anything by hand. I would like to get a second opinion on this. I don't know if this is something that can be kind of just cleaned up, maybe honed. I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot. I know that this is an amazing parts engine so far. All signs are pointing to we just had a slip timing belt. So again, things are so far really good, but I want to clean these things up, lubricate this engine, and then turn it over by hand so we can see inside every single one of these cylinders, and that will tell us whether we should part it or build it. While the cylinders are soaking with some cleaner right now, it seems that the story is coming together on this engine. I want to touch briefly on the condition that I received it in, which pretty much paints the entire picture and goes along with what we've seen so far. So when I got this engine, it was pretty much intact, as you might have seen in the previous video, but it did have the intake manifold off of it, which is pretty necessary in order to pull it out of the car. If you saw on my 360 Spider, when we pulled the intake manifold off to do the gaskets, it's a tedious job. There's a lot of things in the way. But on Drew's car, and if you saw his Ferrari scrap pile again in the prior video, they cut through a lot of the metal stuff. So the metal bracing, a lot of the mounting areas, and a bunch of the wiring harnesses. The things that make an engine tricky to remove, the headers were just sliced off in the center. Like all of that stuff was cut. And initially I thought that they probably at least took the oil pan off and found chunks of metal or something, why they gave me a Ferrari engine that they had deemed scrap. But the more I think about it, they pulled this thing out and literally just sat it there, and the rain did more damage than actually the mechanical issue with this engine. Now remember earlier we removed those plastic timing belt covers. Those were still there. Nobody inspected this stuff. The oil pan, I found 2 nuts off the oil pan initially, but I asked Radarosa about it, and he said that's where a ground strap runs, so that's why those nuts were off. I mean, this thing was pulled out of the car, sat and left a mystery until we pull it apart here. And I would like the engine builders out there to chime in down in the comments, because I'm definitely no expert on this, but it's clear to me that a hydraulic tensioner got weak. It caused the car to slip out of time on one bank, but it didn't slip out of time enough for there to be any catastrophic damage. This thing was a set of hydraulic tensioners and a timing job away from probably running just perfect again. But our big question is, what do we have to do, and how much refurbishing do we have to do, and how much will that refurbishing cost to get it to run like new again? And we'll talk about values here in a second, but this is crazy, it's exciting, and to be completely honest, I don't mean to make Drew, the original owner of this engine, feel bad, but this stuff is worth a tremendous amount. All right, this is the first time we're gonna crank this thing over by hand. If I feel anything weird, I'll stop, but it should be good to go. Let's see what we find. Feels really good. It feels smooth. Very little resistance, obviously. See, while we're pushing things up and down, we're pushing some of that oil out that I put in there, which is no fun, but yeah, it's all really smooth. Now, actually, this cylinder right here, this is something I didn't see before, but if any of the cylinders look bad, it is this one right here. There's quite a bit of corrosion in there. But again, the thing turns, feels good. For the most part, I don't see why you couldn't just build this block and then put it all back together. Now this is the part where I've got to hear from the engine experts down in the comment section what you're seeing in these cylinders. Again, there is a little bit of corrosion, there's a little bit of marking. Like I said, I don't think I can feel anything with my fingertip. Nothing's really catching. Is this something that a hone could clean up? And then, you know, you do the wear items in the block, like your rings, your bearings, and you have a good engine? Or would you need to put in replacement sleeves? Just something that I don't know enough about to make a good judgment call on, but the engine spins over amazing, no binding up, it feels perfect. Come on, I bet you guys didn't expect much out of this free Ferrari engine, and I really didn't, but I think we hit the jackpot here. This engine seems to be the perfect candidate to be rebuilt, and even if it's not, it's worth a fortune. And I don't want to make it look like, oh, someone just gave me this engine that's worth a ton of money and I'm just gonna flip it really quick for some cash. No, like, I like the car project process. If it were up to me, I start spending a bunch of money to rebuild this thing, but that's where I want to run through the numbers with you guys a little bit so you understand what it would entail to rebuild this, and then we can talk about whether it makes more sense to sell it as a few different separate parts or whether we should actually put it back together and use it for something. I currently don't need a 360 engine, but knock on the front bumper of my green one here. It could be any moment where I do need one. So just in the top end, the cylinder heads, I think you could refresh those for about $1,000. That's going to be new valve stem seals and resurface the heads. Again, the valves look good, but a machine shop will be able to pressure test everything and make sure they work good. A used cylinder head currently on eBay, complete with camshafts, sells for over $4,000 right now. That means if you refurbish them and you include a receipt from a machine shop showing, hey, these were all redone and pressure tested and they work like new, I think you could sell them easily for $5,000 a piece. That's $10,000 minus about $1,000 to refurbish them. So around $9,000 just in the top end. Now let's talk about the block. This is the area where I really want to hear from you guys because, again, I don't know a whole lot about it, and I'm assuming because it's a Ferrari, you probably need to stick to Ferrari OEM components. But like those sleeves that we had, a couple of them look a little bit corroded, and it would probably be best to replace those. Each sleeve is $800. If you did all 8 sleeves, that's obviously $6,400. So right there is where you would start to question whether it's worth actually rebuilding this engine. But I really think there's only like 2, maybe 3 questionable sleeves, and maybe it is something that could be honed out. Again, this is where I really want to hear from the engine builders down in the comments section. Now the bearings are something that should definitely be done before it is reinstalled in the car somewhere. A whole bearing set is about $2,000, and it's just something that could be installed while the engine's out of the car pretty easily. The rings, this is again where I don't know if you could get a set of rings that would just fit the pistons here, because rings on like a Toyota Camry or a Ford Mustang or something are not all that expensive, but rings on a Ferrari are $300, $2,400 just for piston rings. And then to get somebody to refurbish all these components that knows what they're doing to make sure that this thing's going to run right when it's all put back together, well, you'd be looking at easily $2,000, $3,000 in labor. So that's where it starts to get questionable as to whether you should rebuild this thing. So again, we know the top end is worth about $9,000 reconditioned. The block itself, just in artistic value, right? You hear about people turning engine blocks into coffee tables because it is a genuine Ferrari block. It's got to be worth a couple grand by itself. For somebody that wants it for parts, it's probably worth $4,000 or $5,000 by itself. So just sitting here separated between the block assembly and the top end assemblies, I think you got $14,000, $15,000. Now I know it's not substantial enough to just say thank you again one more time to Drew for giving me this engine, especially talking about the value of everything here. But I really can't thank him enough because I do enjoy learning more and more about this car, and well, it's probably the car that I've worked on the most at this point and know the most about. So it's just good to further my knowledge on it. And my intentions, again, are not to just go and flip this thing. It is to likely put it all back together and get it to run, and maybe in a car that is not a Ferrari. Guys, if you enjoyed seeing the process of seeing this engine taken apart and learning more about the parts costs involved in rebuilding it, be sure to give this video a huge like. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.